When I read my own biography and the things I've been able to do, I pinch myself. Even now, sitting here as a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I'm just C.Q. Brown Jr. doing my job. And it's hard for me to imagine, I have this role. The fact that I've been to every continent, the fact that I've flown the F-16, but I've flown 20 different aircraft and I still get to fly. I've spent a lot of time in our embassies around the world. I spent a lot of time with our allies and partners. The role that we have as the United States, because our leadership is valued. It's watched. What happens in one part of the world does not stay in one part of the world. I know that we cannot do all we do as a military by ourselves.
I'm a little intimidated, but Chairman Brown, it is truly an honor to have you on the USGLC stage. On behalf of everyone here, thank you for your service. As I told Chairman Brown when we just said hello, it's such a privilege to have you join the USGLC. We have had the great honor of hosting many of your predecessors, Admiral Mullen, Generals Dempsey, General Myers, who I think is here. I haven't said hello yet. General Dunford, General Milley, and to have you is in addition to the honor. We want to talk about some easy topics like the state of the world. But if you won't mind, can we start talking about you? You come from an extraordinary military family. I know your grandfather served in World War II. Your father served in the Vietnam War and commissioned you as an officer. So I thought I would ask if I could, when you were in the Air Force, there's a beautiful picture of you and your father. When you were in the Air Force at ROTC program, I can imagine that you probably didn't expect that so many years later you would be sitting here as the highest ranking military official in our country. And so take us back at that time to think about imagining that. But also I have to ask you, 8 months in to this position, how's it going?
Well, first of all, it is a real honor to be here and represent the 2.1 million men and women that wear our uniform. You're right. I never imagined, matter of fact, the whole reason I'm in the military is this was my dad's idea when I was in high school. He told me 4 years in the military will not hurt you.
39 years later, here you are.
And so he encouraged me to apply for ROTC scholarships. He taught ROTC after his second tour in Vietnam, and it was a way to pay my way through school. I almost quit ROTC after the first semester. As I talked to my dad, he mentored me, and I stuck with it. I was going to do 4 years and get out. My degree's in engineering. I planned to be an engineer in the Air Force, do my 4 years, and move back to Texas. I got a ride in a T-37 when I was training aircraft at the ROTC summer camp, and I said, that was a lot of fun. I think I want to do that. So I changed my mind, decided to become a pilot, and so 39 years later, I didn't use much of my engineering degree and have not been assigned to Texas. Last time I lived in Texas was when I graduated from college. You asked, how's it going? Let me first say that I have extreme confidence in our joint force. Mm-hmm. I have extreme confidence in our men and women in uniform. And I also think that our military prepares leaders for the roles that they get put into. And I've been well prepared by all the positions I've had, the mentors I've had, those I've had a chance to serve with as I've come into, because you don't know what's going to happen when you come into jobs like this, or that you will have this opportunity. As I came in, I laid out some expectations for the Joint Force in a memo on 2 October. I took over on 1 October. And I had 3 expectations. First, honing our warfighting skill has primacy in all we do. Second, to modernize and aggressively lead with new concepts and approaches. And third is trust is the foundation of our profession. And that's kind of laid out where I want to go as the chairman and where we want to work together as a joint force. And so with that as a frame, I feel pretty good about what we're doing. Now, I realize the world is very complex, but that's why we exist. We exist to fight and win our nation's wars. But we want to be so good at what we do that we never get to conflict. and that we were able to work very closely with the rest of the interagency, work with our allies and partners, and make sure we modernize. And then the last is the trust aspect of how we take care of our service members and their families, how we build trust with our elected leadership, and most importantly, how we build trust with the American public. The fact that we're an all-volunteer force, and we want to make sure that we have the trust of the public that we support and defend.
I'm already feeling better. Mr. Chairman, let's turn to the global security environment. You came to this job not spending as much time in Washington. You actually spent it around the world in 4 combatant commands. You served in AFRICOM, in CENTCOM, in EUROCOM, in PACOM, and basically, as I said, around the world. And I recently heard you describe the current landscape. And you said, I've been wearing the uniform for 39 years. This is probably the most dynamic, most challenging that I've seen it yet. How would you assess our threat assessment? How would you state our threat assessment? I know this is unclassified, of course, but the global security environment, and what are the current state, how do you see the current stage in the global arena?
Well, the thing I really do think about is when you look at our national security documents, our national defense strategy, not only in this administration, but also the previous administration, we laid out 5 challenges. People's Republic of China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and violent extremists. Mm-hmm. And when you look at all 5 of those, all 5 of them are active at the moment, and in some aspects, working together. And you see that, particularly when you look at what's happening in Ukraine, how Russia has invaded unprovoked into a neighboring country. There is some support from the People's Republic of China, Iran providing capability, as well as North Korea. And then we have violent extremists that continue to operate around the world. And so when you think about all that, it does make the world more complex. But I will also tell you is the dialogue among our allies and partners has increased. And that's, I think, one of the areas I see most important. Having served in NATO in a couple different jobs, NATO is stronger, not just because you have 2 additional countries, but just the dialogue within NATO is even stronger. The dialogue in the Indo-Pacific. I went to 2 tours in Korea, and then the commander of Pacific Air Forces. I took that position in 2018. And to watch what's happened over the course of the past 6 years with many of the allies and partners we have within the Indo-Pacific, and then at the same time, European countries working and focused on the Indo-Pacific, and Indo-Pacific countries focused on Europe. We know how important allies and partners come together when the world gets complex, and that's the value of these partnerships, these relationships that we have. And I like to say, you never want to cold call in a crisis, you never want to burn a bridge. In this, so.
We're here. Chairman Brown, one of the questions we've already started talking about today is how America shows up, is what are we going to do about these global crises? And I noticed in your confirmation hearing, you spotlighted the roles of all the parts of government. And you said something that really that struck my ear. You said it's not just what the military does, it's what we do in the diplomatic space, the information space, economically. It's all the things work collectively together. It's a common refrain, actually, we've heard, we were just talking about it when we said hello to each other, about that from other combatant commanders who speak on Capitol Hill when they testify. And it reminds me of former Secretary of Defense Bob Gates, a good friend of USGLC's, who actually wrote a book about it. He called it Symphony of Power, where he lists chapter by chapter of how we need to be investing in the economic and information and development and diplomacy. Why is this whole of government approach so important to you that you speak about it, of using the tools, the development and diplomacy alongside defense in order to keep America safe and secure?
Well, as you highlighted, I've spent, although I've had 4 assignments here in Washington, D.C., I spent most of my time as a general officer not in Washington, D.C., until I became the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. And I worked in a number of our combatant commands. And as I've done that, I've spent a lot of time in our embassies around the world. I spent a lot of time with our allies and partners. I'm a big believer in collaboration. I know that we cannot do all we do as a military by ourselves, and the value of our partnerships with the interagency, the value with our allies and partners are really so important. I, by nature, I like to collaborate. I like to work with other people to solve problems, and that collaboration is key. And I think Secretary Gates, the title of his book, and I talk about this. We want to be more symphony than garage band.
I like that one. I hadn't heard that one before.
If you think about it, you want to be doing things in concert, where all parts of our government are working together, from a military, diplomatic, information, economic, how all these work very closely together versus, it is a pickup, we show up once a week and then we're all out of tune. We got to make sure that we're doing things in concert. And the way we do that, again, it's all about relationships. And we want to make sure that we've actually gone through the steps, worked together, built those relationships, looked at and I think the other thing I value is the different perspectives that come from different parts of our agency and our allies and partners, because they see things a bit different than we do in uniform, and the value of us being able to hear each other's perspectives and then know that there is a Venn diagram of where we agree and that we can move things forward. And there'll be some areas that we probably see a little bit differently, which is okay. But that friction actually helps us to identify areas of risk and things that we need to be focused on to be able to move forward. It helps us to look at things with our eyes a little wider open because of the dialogue we have.
Can I ask you about this allies and partnerships, which I've heard you speak about as so important? My math is probably off, but because it's a stat from last month that I saw in 7 months, you've had more than 160 engagements of your counterparts among our allies and partners. And this is a big issue that we talk about when we go to Capitol Hill. Are our allies stepping up? We've got the 75th NATO alliance this year, celebration this year. And we've talked, when we were talking about the national security emergency supplemental, we made the point that for every $1 that America's paying, that Europe is paying $4. So we make that argument all the time. From your perspective, are our allies doing enough? And a second part to that question is, when you say allies, I think you're also talking about more than just government to government, how private sector and nonprofits fit in. So both questions, are allies doing their part, and how do you expand allyship partnership?
Yeah, most definitely. So the thing I do think about is, first of all, is the role that we have as the United States. Because our leadership is valued. It's watched, and when I talk to our allies and partners, they often want to know what we're going to do, and they will step up as well. But we got to make sure that we kind of set the path of the vector of where we see things going, but also listen to them as well. And so I do see that they're stepping up, and they are very interested in addressing the security challenge that we often talk about. I do broaden the definition of allies and partners because it's very easy for those of us in uniform. We talk about allies and partners. We often talk about the military and the alliances we have from a national security perspective. But it's the allies and partners we have within the agency. It's the allies and partners we have within industry. And I also think about how I look to broaden the definition, because for a particular country, we may have a good military relationship, but there's also, and sometimes a very economic relationship, but I may not appreciate as a military member. And I don't want to walk into something and then, upset the whole apple cart because I don't fully understand and appreciate it. So I purposely try to make myself smart. My goal is to go home smarter every day than when I came into the office. And so I'm always focused on how do I better understand with these allies and partnerships so we strengthen our security collectively across the board.
So I want to shift to something that I heard you say last month. You said, we can't predict the future, but we can shape it. So I'm going to take you to Capitol Hill, but I promise I won't be political. Because you've been a really loud and vocal voice on national security resources, and particularly around the risk of a continuing resolution. Failure to predict budget resources. Now, it will not surprise you that USGLC has been pretty vocal about the same thing as it relates to the civilian national security resources. And we have a mutual friend. His name is General or Secretary or just Jim Mattis.
Right.
And he famously, I happened to be on Capitol Hill that day when he was in uniform and he went in front of the Armed Services Committee and he famously said, if you don't fund the State Department fully, I will need more ammunition. So he agrees with us. Why are you out there talking about the importance of needing resources, if you can comment about this, both, again, whole of government, in this national security toolkit, and the risk and danger of these constant continuing resolutions, which we've been in this cycle for years, and will probably be in one this year?
Well, the thing I've talked about here most recently, I've been a general officer for 15 years. So I've been on 1 star 15 years ago. In those 15 years, 1/3 of our time has been under continuing resolutions.
Yeah. Oh.
So 5 of 15 years.
Oh, 5.
When you think about our adversaries, they're not taking a break. If you're running a race, you don't want to keep running a race. You don't want to take a break every third lap and let your adversary to continue to progress. I think the key part that is important to us is the consistency in funding, the predictability in funding helps to build trust. And that trust for us actually helps drive down costs when we work with our defense industrial base, or for any other part of the government, you actually can't predict what you're going to do. And once you are able to drive down that cost and do things more effectively, for the warfighter, we get capability much faster. You can't do that if it's a little bit of a roller coaster ride for industry, and they're trying to maintain a workforce, maintain their facilities, and get us capability. I would say the same thing for all other parts of the government. You're trying to determine how to do things. You can't do that if you don't know what the future looks like. And if we have predictable funding, that gives us a bit of a consistency so we can plan and then we can go execute. And that's going to be important for us going forward, not just for the Department of Defense, but I'd say really across the entire government.
So let me turn to some hotspots in the world. One of which we've already mentioned, but is the situation in Ukraine. I talked to National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan just about an hour ago. This is a group that, as I said, has rallied pretty aggressively on the supplemental, as much on the military side, but the economic side. What do we lose if from a military, from your point of view in the world, if Ukraine is not successful?
Well, the key part here is that I do think about is that what happens in one part of the world does not stay in one part of the world, and it sets it can set a cascading effect of a country can invade another country unprovoked. Mm-hmm. And the work that we do, not just the United States, but I would say the number of nations that support Ukraine help Ukraine defend itself. And we found that when Ukraine has been resourced, they've been fairly effective against a larger, supposedly more capable military. And the key part here is, my hat's off is to the Ukrainian people that they're willed to defend themselves, and we got to stick with them. And I think not just for the United States, but really for all of those that have an interest, it sets I'd say the framework for how we look at global security, and that's what's at risk. Because if we don't pay attention to it here, it could happen someplace else around the world. And those are the things that, why we have to step in collectively in support of Ukraine.
One other kind of broad hotspot that we're going to be talking a lot about today is just the fever pitch of these humanitarian crises. One of our partners, the International Rescue Committee, put a list out at the beginning of the year of the 20 most watched humanitarian crises. And as I looked at those lists, 8 out of 10 are in Africa alone. There are countries, as you know well, we just had an Africa panel, that are all conflict zones. Sudan, DRC, Ethiopia. And I feel like they're the humanitarian crisis of today that are the emergency crisis of tomorrow. How do you look at these humanitarian crises through the lens of a national security emergency crisis of tomorrow?
Well, part of this is, for us to have a good understanding as military members of, each one of these humanitarian crises becomes a seed for a security crisis at a later date. And what you want to do is actually work very closely with our diplomats and other non-governmental agencies to help support so you can actually decrease the potential for a broader security incident. If we don't pay attention to it now, it becomes a challenge later. And that's, as you might imagine, I spend quite a bit of my day paying attention
to the horizon.
to everything that's going around the world. And, but personally, I've always believed I want to be more proactive than reactive.
Yeah.
That way you can actually see things coming, be well prepared for it. How do you mitigate it so you can actually ensure not just the security piece, but it's the people that are being impacted by this that you want to support. And I think that's a key aspect of what we do as a U.S. government, but what we do with many of our allies and partners as well.
Let me get 2 quick questions in before you have to run. I'm going to go back to personal. One of the things that when I've interviewed individuals from the military, they all seem to have this moment in their life experience where they recognize this whole of government, where they realize it can't just be the military alone. Is there somewhere in your 39 years where you said, now I see, it's not just in uniform. We have a lot of veterans in the audience, and we started a program called the Veterans for Smart Power, and it was really a young Marine from Iraq who he told me a story, he pulls up to a village and he meets an elder, and he says, look at all the convoy I have. What do you need? All the supplies. And the elder goes to his beard, he said, I need 2 feeding goats. And he said, I don't have those. And realized then, and that's why we created Veterans for Smart Power. Where's your moment?
Actually, I would say there's several moments, and it's kind of grown over time. I think I would first start, I was the aide to General Fogelman when he was the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. And I had come from Nellis. I was an instructor in the F-16 at the weapons school. I thought I knew a lot about the Air Force, and I realized how much I did not know. Not just about the Air Force, but really having a chance to travel, to go around the world and sit as a fly on the wall in some of these key meetings with senior leaders, whether it's on Capitol Hill or in embassies around the world. It happened again. I ran the action group for Secretary Donnelly and General Schwartz as well. And then my time at United States Central Command and the fact that the 2 wing commands I had were both overseas. Kunsan Air Base, Republic of Korea, and Aviano Air Base in Italy. And so I had to there engage with our partners and spend time at the embassy and really raise my awareness on it's more than just what we do as a military. So I've had several opportunities.
Last question is about service and young people. We have a group called Next Gen. We've had 300 go through our class, and we have about 50 here today as part of this class. And I happen to notice that volunteerism is going down in young people. The military, Peace Corps, foreign service, and we're very proud of our investment in it. What are you saying to young people about why service is such a valuable part of their career trajectory, and whether it's the military or any other choice in the civilian side that they may choose?
Well, one of the things I would say is that you probably get a lot more out of what you put in, what you get out. I mean, the fact of you being able to serve and the opportunities it presents and the doors that it opens. And I'll just say from my own career, I mentioned I was only going to do 4 years, but when I read my own biography and the things I've been able to do, I pinch myself. Even now, sitting here as a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I'm just CQ Brown Jr. doing my job. And it's hard for me to imagine, I have this role. The fact that I've been to every continent, the fact that I've flown the F-16, but I've flown 20 different aircraft and I still get to fly. I mean, it's all these things I've been able to do. And this service for young people opens doors and shows you other aspects of the world. One thing I would highlight is I often say is young people only aspire to be what they see or know about. You don't decide to grow up to be something you don't know anything about. And so, your program of Next Gen opens doors for young people to see what opportunities are to serve and realize that not only do you give, but you get so much back. You're a better leader. You're a better person because of these opportunities. And that's what I tell folks. You can do 4 years or 4 decades, your choice. But when you leave and spend time in our military, you'll walk away as a better person, a better leader, and having talked to many in the private sector, they value our veterans because of their leadership skills, their organizational skills, the talents that, I just think it's a great opportunity. Not whether you serve in uniform or serve in any other form within our country, it adds value.
What a beautiful way to close out this extraordinary conversation. Please thank Chairman C. Wow, that was inspiring. That was really inspiring. Thank you.